In this screencast, we're going to take a look at user management with StackMob. Let's start by going to the StackMob dashboard. Whenever you create a new application on StackMob, a user schema is created for you. Go under Schema Configuration, and there you'll see a new user schema has been created for you automatically. I'm going to click on Edit My User Schema so we can take a closer look at this. You'll see here that it is a special type of schema. It's been created as a user object. And along with that, we get a password field type as well as a username which is set as our primary key. We also have a special option down here to set the forgot password email field. By default, this is set to our username. And when a user needs to retrieve or reset their password, they will actually have an email. You can use a method to have an email sent to that user so they can reset their password. But quite often, a user wants to change their email address in the future, and if you use the username field, that can't be modified after the user object's been created because it's the primary key, and that would break your data integrity. So what I like to do whenever I'm working on a project is create a new field. I call it email, and I give it a field type of string. And here you can see my new field type's been created. But it's not available in my list here because I need to actually save my schema change first. Alright, so I've saved my schema change, and then I can come down here and change my forgot password field to my new email field. This allows the user to change their email in the future and not have to worry about not being able to change their primary key, which is their username. We have other API methods that you can turn off and on, things like the ability to reset the password, the ability to log in through Facebook and Twitter. These are all allowed by default. And then lastly, we have the concept of schema permissions. Obviously, the ability for a user to create a new user account before they've ever logged in means that you might want to set your user schema to create, setting this to open so that anybody who is creating their new account can actually create it. If I said, for example, that a user has to be logged in order to create their account, then that puts a little bit of a barrier for people who've never logged in before. So I often leave this open. As far as read, update, and delete permissions, it might make sense to say that the SM owner needs to be set for read permissions. And what this does means that the person who created this user account is also the person who owns it. So when I create my new user account, I'll be the owner of it, and therefore only I can read it, and maybe only I can update it. And you might not want to allow users to delete their own accounts, so you could say that they're not allowed to delete it. This is just some example schema permissions you might want to use for your application. I'll now save my schema. Okay, so now that I've made my changes to my schema, let's go over to a form here, an application that actually demonstrates this. Here's my wine application. I can add a new wine if I'd like. So let's add a new wine. I'll say Sterling Vineyards, and I'll say save. And I now have my one wine created here. When I go over to my sign up and login form, I can now create a new user. So I'll say Sydney's my username. I'll set my password, and I'll click sign up. Now it just created a new user account for me. So let's go over to the dashboard and take a look at that under Data Management. I can run a query against my user schema, and I can see that the username is Sydney. The password, of course, is hidden because we encrypt passwords on our server side. And our user, our SM owner, is equal to user/Sydney, which is what we want. Let's take a look at our wine schema real quick. Let's do a query there, and we can see we have a winery called Sterling Vineyards, but the SM owner is null. This is because when I created that winery, I was not currently logged in. Let's go back here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Add New Wine, and I'm going to add a new one called Opus 1 and then hit Save. Now I have my two wineries appearing here, and when I do a query against my wine schema, oops, I was not logged in there. Let's go ahead and log in. See, I created my account, but I didn't log in. So Sydney, hello, log in. So there I've logged in, and if I click on user status, I can actually validate that I am currently logged in. Let's go over to add a new wine, and I'll say Caymus Vineyards. I'll hit save, and now when I go back to my dashboard, let's do a query. And great, so now Caymus Vineyards has Sydney listed as the SM owner. And now let's go back to one more thing. Let's go back to our sign up and login form here. So let's just check our user status. Yes, we're logged in. And the last thing we can do is we can log out. So now I've successfully logged out, and I'm going to check my user status, and it's set to false. So why would we go to the trouble of having our users create user accounts in our application? The reason is that inside of StackMob, you'll notice all three wines are appearing, but I'm only the owner for one of them. If I wanted to restrict the ability to read these wines to only the currently logged in user, then I could go to my dashboard and set that up very easily. I go to Schema Configuration, I click on Wine, and if I go down to the bottom, I can change my read permissions and say that allow only the current, only the SM owner of that object to read that those wines. I'll say save my schema, and now I'll come back to my wine page, and I'll do a refresh. And it says that I'm not authorized to view any of the wines because I'm not currently logged in. So let's go ahead over to the sign up form, and I'm going to go ahead and log in Sydney. I say log in. Let's check my status. Yes, I'm logged in. And now if I go back to my my wine app and I'm going to refresh it, we'll see Caymus Vineyards is now appearing here because I've actually set it so that I can read the wines that I own, and I only own one of them. So let's take a look at the code behind this. When I click the sign up button, I take my username and my password, and I'm setting it on a special model that StackMob provides for you. You saw in the previous lessons in Backbone, you need to actually define what your models are. But for the user model, because it's special, we create it for you. So you'll say user equals new stackmob.user, and then you pass in your username and password. Once you've created your new user object, you'll then say user.create, and inside of that you get a success and an error callback handler. When you want to log in your user, you'll create a code that looks very similar where you establish a username and password, and you set those inside of your stackmob.user object again. But this time, instead of calling create, you'll call user.login, and you'll pass in an extra argument. You'll say set a Boolean value of true. This will keep the user logged in between sessions, between refreshes of the browser. And then of course you get the success and error callback handlers. If you want to check the status of the user, you can call stackmob.isLoggedIn, and based on the Boolean value you can say true or false. If you want to log out a user, you can create a new StackMob user object, and this time you don't have to pass in the username or password to create this new user object. Once you're done, you'll say user.logout, and you'll get a success or an error callback handler. And that completes our tutorial about user management using StackMob